Happy Hardscrabble Day, everyone. My name is Andrew Dupont, and I'm the owner of Silverhammer Restoration and Construction. My crew is working on this house, and this is Amy Dubin, the owner of the house.
Okay, so this is a property that I purchased from the Migliorellis in the year 2000, and I basically wanted to get a few extra acres to add to our house on Pitcher Lane, but they said they'd only sell me the whole thing. So I bought the whole thing, and it came with this house and barn, which was in really horrible condition. It was hard to see what it really was. It was kind of overgrown and occupied by someone who really didn't care for it. It was in a kind of a state that had been ruined in a lot of ways, and a lot of people who looked at it thought it was pretty ruined. But I felt that since I do renovation projects for a living, I could see what it could be, but it was just a matter of finding a crew who could actually implement what I had in mind. So one day I got a call from Emily Major, who's the town historian, asking me if she could use it as the subject for her master's thesis at UMass Amherst, that she was going to do a social history of the house for the first year, and the second year would be a historic structures report. And this was exactly what I wanted to have done, but I really didn't know how to go about it. So I told Emily, yeah, absolutely, go for it. There was some the house was being vandalized. People were getting in and stealing the hardware and graffitiing the walls, and at the same time the powder post beetles had gotten into the beams in the basement, so it was starting to really sink on the front of the east parlor. So structurally it was in kind of compromising condition, and all the door frames were tilted. It was really starting to settle back into the ground. It was just a matter of time. So I got a repair permit from the town and took someone who was working on the Bowery in Claremont, which is a Dutch house, which was also undergoing a real authentic period restoration and addition. And he repaired the beams, so I felt it was safe for Emily to come in. And that was basically how we got started with the repair permit. I didn't want to do what everyone was telling me to do, which was basically tear down the parts that were rotten and replace them with new structure. Because to me, and Emily pointed out to me, the whole point of the house was the structure. And even though the posts were rotten and the foundations were completely crumbling, and in fact had been supported by like concrete retaining walls poured in the 1940s, which were making it worse, even though everything was pretty much crumbling, it was all there. It was just a matter of repairing it and getting it back in usable order. So the tough part was finding a team that would do that. But luckily, I was introduced to Andrew, and I think we just kind of talked about how I imagined this project unfolding, which was recreating what it was, repairing what we had as opposed to replacing. And the first decision to make was what to do about the foundations, which were good under the ground, although sort of bulging, but terrible, just rubble above the ground because water had been seeping in. And the decision was to do poor foundations with concrete and kind of face them so that they look old, or do we just go for the stone and do a masonry foundation? And luckily Andrew was absolutely the right guy, and we went for the masonry foundation, which was the basic decision of the house, that if you take the time to do that, then you're setting a tone for the quality of project that is going to unfold in the whole thing. So Andrew, I mean, this is how they built the pyramids, with two guys, two guys jacked up, used jacks and LVLs.
Yep, there were some LVLs we used
So
in the process.
Basically, we demolished what we had to demolish inside the house to lighten it. And you can definitely add to what I'm saying, to lighten up the structure so that they could use these very long LVL beams and jacks and lift up the house so Andrew could get underneath and rebuild the stone foundations using a lot of the stone that was there.
Right.
So the goal was to reuse everything. Everything got recycled.
Yeah. Yeah, all the foundations that you see coming out of the ground were there, but they were taken apart and rebuilt. And what Amy was describing is really the machinations of how we achieve that, lifting, jacking, you know, basically getting the house suspended while we did the repairs structurally of things that had rotten and gone away.
So while he's doing the foundations, he's rebuilding the posts. So we didn't replace posts. We just added to them sistered wood to it to give it the structure, put the structure back. And that was a kind of a policy decision. You can go new construction or you can just work with what you have. And that was really my vision for the way I wanted to do this house. And it's tough to find somebody who will do that because everyone, you know, the mantra is, it's so much cheaper just to replace it. I'm not sure that's actually true, but that's usually what people tell you.
I wonder.
I really wonder about that, but it took us, I don't know, a good year to get to the house to the point where we could actually start working on it. You know, just to get the foundations done, the posts done, the back addition dug out. We had to dig it out so we could put in a crawl space, so we could put systems under there and just rebuild that whole structure. And it was just a shell. So at least a year, maybe a year and a half.
Yeah, and we weren't working through the winter because
Right.
the house wasn't heated and it wasn't
Right.
insulated. So that first season was a little shorter. And that was all the structural work.
Yeah, all the
sill
basic,
repair and the posts.
the sills, the posts, the foundation, just to get it ready.
Yep.
And then we had to, then we had the infrastructure. So we dug a new well, we installed a septic, and we also had a fantastic guy who for 2 weeks or maybe even 3 weeks with his equipment came and cleared all the poison ivy and barbed wire and vines and trees and horrible trees and weed trees and everything that just made the property a total mess. We had him clear everything and create the contours we wanted, and we created a locust grove by taking out everything that wasn't a locust. I mean, it was so overgrown, you could barely even see the house. We saved the ancient iris bulbs and planted them. You know, that was a big fixation of mine. But so after getting the basic structure ready to work on, we did the infrastructure, which was well, septic. What else did we put in? Electrical underground.
Yep.
Electrical went underground, new electrical service. So that was all sort of going on simultaneously. And then we started to rebuild.
So why don't we take you inside the house? It's still very much a work site, but we are in the finishing stages. So we'll take you inside to show you that.
I had done a measured drawing, had an architect do a measured drawing about 20 years ago, which we basically gave us the existing layout. And then it was a process of eliminating and getting it back to the 1790. The house was built, the original house was built around 1740. And it was built as a Dutch house, probably one room with maybe an animal room, with jambless fireplaces. And then it was all modified in the Federal period around 1800, and the center hall was put in and the side light windows were put in. So we had to decide what period we were going to restore to. And basically decided we would restore to the Federal period. So we had the Federal moldings, which we copied. We had the center hall, which we opened up. It had a bathroom in it. So we knocked out everything that wasn't a basic, simple Federal plan. And that was how I arrived at the architecture for the place. We changed a lot of the windows. the front window locations were the same. The back window locations were pretty much boarded up. So I basically did it so that you had a lot of light coming through, sort of sacrificing furniture wall space for windows, to just open up the house. And Emily did all the windows, and they're all rebuilt sashes with restoration glass, so that's the nice wavy glass. But that was basically the plan, to take it back, to pick a period and rebuild it at that period with maybe a little of a modern feel, which was very subtle. Things like instead of putting in a doorway for a door, I widened it, which would be a little bit more modern, just to make the house a little bit more open. We tried to get off the grid as far as energy sources, but it wasn't cost effective to do geothermal. So we ended up putting in a propane tank and doing a hot water circulating, very high efficiency, lots of zones, hot water circulating radiator system using radiators that we salvaged and restored. There are solar panels on the barn, which cover the cost of the electricity for the house. And it's very well insulated to Red Hook Buildings Department standards. So, so why don't we
Indeed.
go in?
Let's go inside. Right, so although the house was built earlier, this is really the 1790 version of the house. That's what you're seeing. The center hall and side lights. And this was here when we started the work on the house. This is more or less how it looked.
Except there was a bathroom where the staircase is.
Yeah, they had filled in some of the spaces with things, and we emptied it and were able to sort of return it. This is the original staircase, just this first rise. That was still in the house. The rest was gone, so we had that rebuilt. We were able to kind of figure on what the design generally would have been, and so we recreated that. This is a typical federal period newel post and handrails. We did have an original newel post that we used, so this is really what would have been here at the 1790 update. Originally the house was a two-family house, and this is the old doorway that was between the two rooms. And when we opened up this wall to repair it, we found the doorway inside. So that was really something that had been closed up since 1790.
Also the beams had, the main beams had all been shaved off. So these beams we had to replace because what was here was really inadequate for any kind of weight above it. And there's a bathroom above it, and they also look terrible. But the main beams in the two parlors had been shaved off probably around 1790 because they dropped ceilings. And so the beams were horrible and also structurally not strong enough, particularly on this side of the house. They really destroyed the structural integrity by doing that. So Andrew and one guy installed 25-foot hemlock
we'll take you inside to see
Yeah.
those. So this here is the east living room. And you'll see the beams that Amy's referring to are these up here. So the original beams were poplar and red pine. And as Amy described, they've been hacked probably about 5 or 6 inches off the bottom. So they really were kind of sagging and they looked horrible. And we made the decision the best way to make the room look great and authentic was really just to take the old ones out, replace them with new ones. These are hemlock. These are the original floors, ceiling boards and floors up top. So those had to be taken up while we changed these beams out and then laid back down. But I think they laid down pretty well.
A lot of the decisions in the house were based on the fact that we weren't dropping any ceilings and we weren't building out any walls. So you don't have room for ductwork. You can't have a toilet that has a trap underneath it. You know, you can't put overhead lighting. So those were just basic choices that dictated things that we could and couldn't do in the house. I just
Yeah.
wasn't willing to compromise.
Mhm.
So the ceiling here is the floor above.
Yep. And then this would have been fireplace that was built in 1790 during that update.
Well, this was here, except not
That's right.
finished.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is the fireplace. This is the one that was built. We did redo the hearth, so that was recently done. And then the back wall did need to get rebuilt outside. That was in a lot of trouble. And the top of the chimney as well was taken down just to about the nailer here. We put in a new flue and a damper and then built it back up. So this will be a working fireplace now that it's been restored.
And we're gonna make this mantle, this is a period mantle, that it wasn't with the house, but it works, so we're going to, put it in this position, and so it'll be modified so that it's right. We decided to do all plaster, no sheetrock, it's all insulated behind it. With wire lath.
Yep, and then this is a doorway, that probably was here in the update of the house, but it comes into the kitchen. So this from back here is the kitchen.
So when the house was built, this was a separate building that was moved up and basically attached to the roof line of the house in front. Originally it was three rooms, right? 2 rooms, 3 rooms.
What, which one?
This space.
Well, yeah, this was originally 3, so this would have been a house that was brought, instead of just building an addition, they dismantled the house from somewhere else, they took apart the posts and the beams and the siding, they brought it here, rebuilt it and tied it together on the back of the existing house.
Yeah.
So that's why you see the beams are sort of a different style, they're not quite as heavy, but they are the original ones. And this is where the house would have originally ended, and the part that you're standing and filming is sort of the connection that was made between the 2 buildings. Yeah.
There's a loft above here, and that closet, it will have a ladder up to the loft, which we could see was there because there was a shadow of it, so we know what that shape was, and we're gonna recreate that.
Right. Yeah, because this room, even at the 1790 update, would have been all about cooking, all about serving. This small room here would have been for food storage, meats, whatever. This room here would have been more like the go-between, between where the cooking was actually done, and then maybe putting together the dinner and bringing it out to serve people.
We added the windows. I mean,
Yeah,
there was.
there's a lot more windows than what originally been here.
And there was a door back there in the corner.
That's
That
right,
was it, and
right.
there was a chimney. where
Yeah,
you're
this would have been
standing.
the hearth. This had a jamless fireplace at the time. So all the cooking would have been done right here on this end. So there would have been a masonry wall here, a chimney up top, a big hearth on the floor, and that's where they would have cooked.
And then we added, this whole wall is different. There was
There was a window
there
here.
was a window somewhere.
Yeah, maybe
but-
just one.
But we put a Dutch door, one of my carpenters made the Dutch door, and then Andrew did the terrace to
Yeah.
create a real outdoor room. And then I love this locust grove, so I wanted the view of that from this room. We haven't finished the work on the beams yet. We're cleaning them off. They'll be darker. We're just working on this room now.
So maybe we'll take you into the west living room just to finish off the first floor.
It's all wood floors. This is a new wide board floor, but looks old. The floor in the entrance hall is very unusual pine floor, 21 to 24 inch wide boards that I got from a salvage yard in New Hampshire that fit perfectly in the space. It was from a house in Wellesley, Massachusetts, an 18th century house that was being torn down. So we were really lucky with this. And then the floor in the west living room is the original wood, which we'll paint. The east living room is also salvaged wood that I got from the same salvage yard. So it's not as fine as the entrance hall wood, but it'll look good and look period. So this is the west living room.
Right.
We're also not painting the walls, we're lime washing the walls, which they would have done.
Yeah.
You go ahead.
Yeah, so likewise the beams got changed here as well. Same program, and when we arrived, this chimney had been already removed, so we're gonna rebuild that. If you come in here, just a little further, and then just turn yourself around so you can look back through this doorway into that doorway. See? So from this room, there'll be a fireplace behind us, and you'll be looking across to a fireplace, and likewise, if you're in there and look back, you'll see the matching fireplace. So that is yet to come, but that's how the layout will be, ultimately. And behind that, what you can see is a mudroom. There'll be laundry back there, a sink, place to hang your coats. This is a bathroom here, the downstairs bathroom. That's a later building that was probably added in 1920. And so we're doing it in the same style in the interior, but it's really it's a modern structure. Okay, so we head upstairs. Here, let me just I'm gonna shut a fan off and just go ahead of you.
So this was a challenge because the original stair, this was always the sort of the conundrum of the building. The stair came up and then you basically hit your head and went to the right. And Emily pretty much figured out how this original stair had gone from looking at shadows along the wall where she could see how the risers had gone. So we had an architect, what was he called? An architectural carpenter. And we worked together to design the staircase that allowed for good ceiling height, because we had to clear the beams. We had to get decent ceiling height under the back wall and have enough space to move around. So it was tricky, but it actually, I think, kind of worked out exactly perfectly.
Yeah, so if you set yourself up over there and you kind of look at this landing room, yeah.
This landing was a creation.
Yeah, we did expand it out, so it's a slightly larger landing, but essentially this is what was here. As you can see, there's an old hallway.
No, that was one room.
Right.
That was one room, and there was a wall there. So we created the 2 bedrooms and the landing to make it more gracious. This was a room here, which is becoming a bathroom. And then there was a doorway here and this doorway. The paneling came from different places, I guess.
Yeah, but
This was original. This was never changed. But basically we had this painted paneling and we just put it back to create this painted paneled space.
All right, so this is the master bedroom. And although it wouldn't have been cathedral, then it would have been called a master bedroom. That's what it is, and that's what we've done.
Another decision that we made was to allow the collar ties to just float, not worry about them. like in here, in this entrance, instead of enclosing the collar ties under the ceiling, we just let them
Float above.
float.
Yep. So that's it, and then here's the new chimney that just has been rebuilt. And so we use modern brick inside because upstairs the chimney would just be plastered. All these walls on the gable ends, they'll be plastered. These are casement windows. They're not set up quite yet to be operable, but they'll swing inside. It's
So
kind of how they'll...
There was double hung downstairs and casement upstairs.
Originally casement. When we got here, there actually were some double hungs up here because it was a later version of windows. So we are returning them back to that period. Yeah, this will get plastered. Behind you, if you come over to here, you can see the closet. So this is sort of, remember, this is it's a built-in, but it's done in old style. So
With
this
old
will-
nails,
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
So this will just be the closet here. And then there will be a passage. I mean, there is a passage. And this is going back into the loft space, which is above the kitchen. And it would have been traditionally for servants. If you went back far enough, it would have been for slaves, and you wouldn't have had a passage here necessarily. You really would have just had that back staircase going so they could go up and down from the kitchen, and then that's where they stayed when they slept.
So we can go through it. So what we tried to do in putting this back together was make it look as original as possible by using wood that we saved. We've saved everything. So, you know, we put back lime washed wood and used old wood to create the door frame behind you. Tried to keep things exposed which show the structure of the house. For example, these elements have numbers on them that would have been, that were incised in, that would have matched, you know, the numbers were put in to match pieces of wood.
The posts
The posts.
to where they go in with the beam and then connect to the plate.
So we're not covering any of that. And then this was this kind of crazy room that has this amazing, what do you call this?
Well, these are just basically sawed off when it was from a mill. When you would square off a piece of wood to eventually be cut into lumber, they'd have the cutoffs. So these are the round edges. They weren't exactly useful for much if you wanted to do something more finished, but for a room that was for the servants, you could do something crude. And we're just so lucky that they did, and it's still here. So it was just lime washed, and then on the other side it was plastered. So
Which is
really,
what we're gonna
it's a timber cut-off wall. It's really what it is, for lack of a better word.
And then the inside, that sloped ceiling wall was here.
Yeah.
We just removed it so we could insulate, which I hated to do because the wood on the underside of the roof was so gorgeous.
It was.
It was
Yeah.
such a
When
shame to
we
have to
came in
cover
here,
it. It was,
you could just see the roof sheathing underneath.
you
this.
could just see the structure and the roof sheathing.
Yeah, the
which
whole
was
room was this
beautiful.
color, really. Just the patinaed wood. It really felt kind of like the oldest part of the house in some way.
Really beautiful.
Yeah.
But we had to insulate, so that was that.
Yeah, there's no, you can't have a useful heating system without the insulation, so.
And what else do we do? So then we just decided to use the wood, instead of finishing it with plastered, to just do the boards.
Yeah, wooden planks, and this is typical of how they would have finished an upstairs. They just would have put planks on the wall and then probably painted them.
And then we have a little sort of a Dutch bed to climb into on the far wall.
Yeah.
And underneath it, we're gonna cover this with a thick piece of glass so that you can see what the structure of the original.
Right, and this is
You
how
can
they
explain that,
insulated. Yeah,
Andrew.
this is how they insulated exterior walls, because this originally was an exterior wall of the house. This is called wattle and daub. It's an English version of nogging. Sometimes they'd use brick inside between the framing, post and beam. And so these are basically pieces of chestnut that are rough hewn, and they're dropped into grooves on either side of the posts, and they edge them down, they stack them up, and then they push mud into them, basically. So what you get is this kind of a finish. Then they whitewash it.
Mud and straw.
Yeah, it's mud and straw, and it really insulates it. There's like no drafts that can get through, keeps the warmth inside the house. And that was in most of the house, and we did have to often remove it to insulate properly.
Well, also we had to remove it to lighten the house so we could lift it.
Sure. It was kind of falling out at that point.
So this room has this ladder stair that comes up the back, which will have a railing around it, and it will have the casement. The windows you're looking at now are just the storm windows. It will have the 6. Oh.
Yeah. We should get and just show her the rest of the.
Oh, okay.
stairs.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So this is the bathroom, and then these are just 2 bedrooms. Will also be upstairs. And that's the larger of the 2 rooms. That will just be plastered. And this one is the smaller of the 2 rooms, but we had these wonderful boards that came out of the house. Maybe not necessarily from this room, maybe it was the other room, but they're original. And they have the small bead on them, which is like particularly a Dutch detail. They're hand planed, and these are going to adorn the ceiling of this room. So that was lovely to have that material to reuse. I guess that's really it.
It has a barn, an early 19th century barn that we rebuilt, reinforced. It was filled with hay, and the hay was forcing it to kind of collapse. So we removed all the hay, which took like 3 summers, and then repaired the structure with original materials, reusing as much as we could of what we had, locust posts and stuff like that.
Okay, that's great.
That's it.
All right, thank you.